Netanyahu's making the point that, I have to do what's best for Israel. And so if Lebanon's going to attack, I have to respond. We have to do that as a nation.
President Trump is the president of the United States. He has to look out for the best interests of the United States. We could argue that it's not in the best interest of the United States to go down this road. But if he says, listen, I understand that it's going to make things more difficult to deal with down the road, and it could end up strengthening Iran in ways that are not good. And there's all sorts of, there is negative fallout. But on balance, bringing down the price of oil, getting the Straits of Hormuz open, if he determined that it's in America's best interest to go down this route, as an Israeli, I can't really have a quarrel with that. He's the president of the United States.
Welcome to this episode of Shoulder to Shoulder, a podcast where a pastor and a rabbi get to the heart of issues that matter to people of faith. I'm Pastor Doug Reed, here with my friend, Rabbi Pesach Wolicki. And on this episode, we'll be having a conversation all about the recent MOU between Iran and the U.S. and all that is going down in the Middle East. Before we jump into our conversation, please like our Facebook page and join our Facebook group, the Shoulder to Shoulder community, where you can interact with Pesach and me all week long. The best way to support this podcast is to come on over to Patreon, subscribe to Shoulder. For just $10 a month, you're helping us bring this message of Shoulder to Shoulder to more and more people all around the world. As a thank you for your $10 subscription, you'll get exclusive access to chapter-by-chapter Bible study beginning in Genesis chapter 1 from Rabbi Pesach and myself. So go on over to Patreon, subscribe to Shoulder for just $10 a month. We're grateful for our sponsor, Israel 365 News, which is the place for you to go and get your news and information before going to anyone else. Go on over to Israel365news.com to check out some of their articles and be sure to read Rabbi Pesach and my columns. Every week, Israel 365 has incredible products and initiatives that they are getting behind. And this week, what are we supporting, Pesach?
Well, Doug, every day lies about Israel spread online faster than the truth can catch up. And my good friend Charlie Kirk saw this problem clearly and famously. A few months before he was murdered, he wrote a letter to Prime Minister Netanyahu outlining what Israel could do better about telling its own story and fighting back against these lies. And he recommended the creation of something that he called the Israel Truth Network, a rapid response, a mechanism to put out fact sheets in real time, responding to whatever the lie of the day about Israel happens to be. He also recommended building a website with a back end, with an archive, and creating video content to go along with it, the whole 9 yards to push back effectively with well-sourced material, user-friendly material that could push back against the lies on Israel. And shortly before he was murdered, in the last couple months of his life, he started advising us, and we were working with a few people from his team to create the Israel Truth Network, and it is now up and running. So sign up for the daily briefs, join the fight for truth, go to theisraeltruthnetwork.org. Make sure you include the THE, the israeltruthnetwork.org, spell it out as one word, and then click in the top left corner to sign up for the news briefs, and you will get in your inbox, you will get these short, well-sourced, very clear responses to lies about Israel. If there happens to be a rare day where there's no brand new lie being spread about Israel in the news, we deal with some of the classic lies about Israel. They're all archived on the website, and the website is growing. And it's going to, as we're adding more material to it, it's going to include a real comprehensive archive of many issues relating to Israel. So go to theisraeltruthnetwork.org, sign up for the briefs, and share them with friends. It's a great way to be well armed to push back against all the lies about Israel.
Super important. And there's lots going on right now in the world that people have questions about. I have received so many messages, texts, Facebook messages, and others. What is going on? Pastor, help me. What is happening? Why such a quick about face, turn from President Trump? Help me understand. Is this some 4D chess that he's playing? I've gotten all the questions. And like a good pastor, my response was not geopolitical. It was, you know what? Psalm 2, the nations rage and he who sits in heaven laughs. I don't know what's going on right now, but I know that God is in control. So Pesach, we have to help our listeners make sense of what is going on, because it all caught me by surprise, caught me off guard to see so much of the vice president kind of taking the lead on some of this stuff has put people on their heels because he seems to have a different worldview than a lot of others in the cabinet. And I'm just kind of flabbergasted. I'm sure Israel is reeling as well and feeling it. I've been watching a lot of our friends and former podcast guests try and make sense of it in their own way between social media posts and articles and other things. But I think we should deal with a little bit of what is actually in the MOU, because a lot of people are talking about it but haven't read it. And then we need to help our listeners make some sense of it so that they can pray, so that they can be engaged, so that they can know what's going on. So how are you, and how has it hit Pesach Wolicki?
So I'm doing great. And for those of our listeners, of our viewers who actually follow the YouTube channel, follow my personal YouTube channel, if you've been watching my videos since this MOU was released, then you know my take, and you're probably not as worried as most people are, because of you'll hear what my take is, and I'm going to get into a lot of it. So some of what I'm going to say here is going to be repetition from a variety of different videos that I had, but I think what I'd like to do here is have the kind of most comprehensive treatment of this thing, because I've made a number of videos about different aspects of this, and the situation is changing day by day, because it's not just the MOU.
Hour
it's
by hour sometimes.
Right. It's what people say about it. It's what happened in Geneva over the last couple of days. There's a lot going on. And by the time this podcast is released, which is usually about a day and a half after we record it, things could change even more. So we're not exactly sure where things are going to be when this is released. Maybe it'll all be old news by then. But before we get into the details of it, Doug, before we go ahead and read the clauses of the MOU and understand what this deal is, let me just start out by saying this. The pro-Israel community has an overreaction problem. We tend to, if Trump is on a day where Trump does what we want, it's like, wow, he's like Cyrus the Great, and he's the great, and the redemption is coming.
Banners up in the streets of Jerusalem. We're naming buildings after him.
We're winning. And then if he does something that we don't like, it's like, oh my gosh, he's betrayed us. He's turned on us. That's the end of the relationship between Bibi and Trump. Like, we have to just relax. We have to relax and remember that, first of all, as you said, God is on the throne, and that's fine, and we will be fine. But I'm saying even more when we're talking about what Trump is doing, we have to relax, take a deep breath, and think back to some of the other things that we've seen. The 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's 2 steps back. We just have to keep a level head, and that's what I'm going to try to convey in my remarks. So that's the chill pill we all need to take. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're all worked up and you're really upset at Trump and you're really upset about this MOU and you're really worried about Israel and what does this mean, go make a cup of tea, hit pause on the podcast, come back, sit down, and we'll get into it. Okay?
Well, so I often say to people, think about the alternative. Trump could not be the president right now.
Oh my God. That's a whole other thing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
could you imagine the dystopian hell we'd be living in if Kamala Harris was president? Forget about the fact that we never would have been able to weaken Iran the way we have. There's so many things that couldn't have happened. Who knows if the hostages would have ever come home? The list goes on and on and on. Okay, we have a tremendous amount to be grateful for. But in all fairness to people, gratitude for what was done does not exempt President Trump if he's making a grave mistake.
Sure.
Because I've been critical of him. And this MOU, there's a lot to criticize about this MOU. Don't get me wrong, you'll see what I say about it. I'm not saying this MOU is good. It's not good. But it's not nearly the disaster people think it is, as I will explain. Okay?
Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, the text is famously 14 points, 14-point memorandum of understanding. Okay? Now, it's critical to know, I'm going to share clause 13 with you first. I know that sounds a little weird because it's the second to last clause. Because the 13th clause says as follows. It says, after signing this MOU and subject to the beginning of the implementation of paragraphs 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11 of this MOU, and the continuing implementation of these measures, meaning they're not one-time things, they're things that have to be implemented and stay implemented, The United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran will start negotiations regarding the final deal exclusively on the other paragraphs. And the reason I'm reading that first is that that clause gives us sequencing. It gives us the sequencing. And the sequencing isn't that clause 1 comes before clause 2, comes before clause 3, comes before clause 4. The Gaza 20-point plan, if we all remember that one from months ago, was written in sequence. Meaning you read it and it went through the chronology of how things are supposed to play out. This one is not written in that order. And that's what this clause is about. It's saying that there are 5 clauses that all need to be implemented immediately. That these are if we want to call it phase 1. They don't use the term phase 1, phase 2 in this, but that's what it basically says here, is that these 5 clauses, these 5 paragraphs, 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11, they are the preconditions for moving forward with everything else. And this is so critical here, because with these deals, let me say something about the structure of these deals. At this point, we're starting to get used to reading these deals, these peace deals, like the 20. I'm going to compare it to the Gaza 20-point plan because we're more familiar with that. It's been around longer. We've talked about it more on this show. In the Gaza 20-point plan, the big problem with it, we talked about this ad nauseum. The big problem with the Gaza 20-point plan was that the biggest issue in it, the biggest problem we're trying to solve with Gaza, is getting rid of Hamas, is disarming Hamas. All the other pipe dreams about reconstruction and investment and building a better life for the Gazans and who's going to govern it, and will there be some technocrats, and will the other Arab states be involved, and are we going to what all of that looks like post Hamas is all. The precondition for all of it is that you get rid of Hamas. Right. And that's why we've never gotten past phase 1 in Gaza. There's been no progress whatsoever past phase 1. We got the hostages back.
And I think what's interesting too with these MOUs is they're not a peace treaty. They're not signed by both parties. They're in this weird space where it's kind of like, we would like to talk about some things, so we're going to take 60 days to talk about some things.
You just hit the nail on the head.
It's very loose. It's not, Trump keeps calling it a peace deal, but it's really just an agreement to have a talk. I mean, that's all it is.
Oh, for sure. And you know what? What you said is actually the key. It's the key to what I just said. When I started and I said we all have to calm down, it's because of what you said. Let me show it to you in the actual memorandum. So let's do this in the order that it's supposed to be implemented. So let's start with 1, 4, 5, 10, and 11. So what's supposed to happen first? So clause 1 has to do with Lebanon. Okay, let me read you 1. 1 reads as follows. The United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies in the current war are signing this MOU to declare the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon, and undertake from now on not to initiate any war or any military operation against each other, and to refrain from the threat or use of force against each other, and ensuring the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. The final deal will confirm the permanent termination of the war on all fronts, including in Lebanon. That's the third time I mentioned Lebanon, and other provisions of this paragraph. So the first clause here is that there has to be a termination of all military operations in Lebanon. But the problem with it is that it says that the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies are signing this MOU. And that's not true.
Right.
Israel didn't sign this MOU.
I don't think they even saw it until after it was signed.
But even if they saw it, Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement from the Prime Minister's office, the official statement of the Prime Minister about the MOU, thanked, it was very polite and diplomatic, and it thanked President Trump for all his efforts to prevent a nuclear Iran. But the opening sentence of it was, the state of Israel is not party to this memorandum of understanding.
Correct.
So that opening statement is simply just false.
Well, and Prime Minister Netanyahu made a very quippy comment. He was giving a speech somewhere. I saw the clip this morning, and he said, in Israel, apparently I only do whatever President Trump tells me to do. And in America, President Trump only does what I tell him to do. And it got a good laugh. But it is one of those things that Israel and America are two separate countries. When the interests align, it's beautiful and wonderful. And we've been able to do some incredible things together, both technologically, militarily, intelligence. But we're two different countries. And so, Prime Minister's really, Netanyahu's making the point that, I have to do what's best for Israel. And so if Lebanon's going to attack, I have to respond. We have to do that as a nation.
And that also speaks to the whole, to all the screeching on the pro-Israel side that Trump betrayed us. Look, President Trump is the president of the United States. He has to look out for the best interests of the United States.
Correct.
And we could argue that it's not in the best interest of the United States to go down this road, but he's the commander in chief. And if he determined that putting a pause on all the kinetic activity with all of the negatives of that, everything has got negatives and positives. If he says, listen, I understand that it's going to make things more difficult to deal with down the road, and it could end up strengthening Iran in ways that are not good. And there's all sorts of, there is negative fallout, but on balance, bringing down the price of oil, getting the Straits of Hormuz opened, and giving this thing a shot, and not angering my friends in Pakistan and in Turkey who really want me to do this negotiation for whatever his reasons were. If he determined that it's in America's best interest to go down this route, as an Israeli, I can't really have a quarrel with that. He's the president of the United States, and and the U.S. and Israel, as you said, that's something that's so important. I was very uncomfortable at the beginning of the war when there was all this rah about how Israel and the U.S. it's like one fighting force. We're arm in arm. We're shoulder to shoulder. We're doing no pun intended, but
it's a good name for a podcast.
Yeah, exactly. It was wonderful. But all of that talk, it made me very uncomfortable. And I even said it in a few interviews that I did. I was like, whoa, calm down. Just because we're doing the same thing now, and our air forces are working together, let's not fool ourselves. We do not have the same objectives. And just let's be realistic. We don't. Anyway.
Well, and I think there's also an element, yes, in the best interest of the United States, and probably an unspoken thing, and I've heard a few pundits mention it. There's also, in the back of President Trump's mind, he's thinking about the economy, he's thinking about gas prices, he's thinking about the midterm election.
In the forefront of his mind. That's not even in the back of his mind.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so there's an element of what's best for the United States, what's best for President Trump and his party in the midterm elections. So there's layers to this. It's not just about right and wrong, Israel and Iran, the moral case where a lot of people go for the war. But ultimately, President Trump is doing what's best for the United States, what's best for him politically, and Israel has to do what's best for Israel. Exactly.
Anyways, so we have clause 1 that's supposed to be immediate. And then we have clauses 4 and 5. I'm not going to read these in full because it's boring. Clause 4 is that the naval blockade that the U.S. put on Iran gets lifted. Clause 5 is that the Straits of Hormuz get opened. And a lot of people were screeching about this. And because in it says that for 60 days, Iran can't charge any fees, which implies that after 60 days, they can start charging fees. So everyone was like, what do you mean? It's illegal to charge fees. That's the whole issue, right? How can we concede that? Okay, well, I'll get to that in a moment. I think there's a lot of the concessions in this document that are upsetting people. I want to first get through a few things, and then I'm going to make a statement about all of them. Because I'll tell you the punchline now. This MOU was built to fail. It will never, mark my words, it will never be implemented. Just like the Gaza 20-point plan will never be implemented. It won't be. Okay. Now, is that good news or bad news? Depends how you look at it. It's good and bad, but that's my belief. So we have 4 is removing the blockade. 5 is opening up the Straits of Hormuz, and we had 2 more. Right? We had 10 and 11. So what's 10? 10 is that the U.S. is going to lift sanctions, and 11 is that all of the frozen assets of Iran are going to get released to them. Okay, those are the 5 things that Iran is insisting on immediately. They need cash, The U.S. wants the straits opened. They want the blockade lifted. They want Lebanon, they want Lebanon to be kept quiet, right? They want sanctions lifted. Those are the immediate things. Now, I mentioned before that in the Gaza 20-point plan, the big flaw in it was the disarming of Hamas. But it's not just that Hamas didn't get disarmed. It's that when you read the Gaza 20-point plan, it had some very specific things in it. For example, when it talks about the International Stabilization Force, which is going to be the security force, the police force in Gaza after Hamas is removed, which is, of course, never going to happen or hasn't happened. It says there that it's going to be overseen by the Egyptians and the Jordanians. There were very specific things in there like that. And about how the Board of Peace will work. Very specific. But when it came to the disarming of Hamas, what did it say there? It said that Gaza will be demilitarized through an agreed upon process. What does that mean? Who's going to do it?
Yeah.
How? What agreed upon process? By who? Who's agreeing? Like, what are you talking about? It's so vague. And in fact, we saw after the Gaza 20-point plan was signed and President Trump was asked on Fox, who's going to disarm Hamas? And he said, I don't know, maybe we'll do it, maybe Israel will do it. And then Marco Rubio was asked, and he said, no, Israel can't do it because that would be the end of the ceasefire. And then Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff were on 60 Minutes, and they were asked about it, and they said, well, the International Stabilization Force will do it, which is incorrect. And they're supposed to come in afterwards. And then King Abdullah of Jordan was asked about what Witkoff and Kushner said, that the International Stabilization Force that he's supposed to oversee is going to disarm Hamas. And he said, we're not going to disarm Hamas. We come in afterwards. He's right. So it was written, but what's the problem? It's not just one clause of the 20-point plan. It's the most important clause of the 20-point plan. It's the whole reason for the thing is to move to a post-Hamas Gaza, and the post-Hamas part of it is completely vague. Why do I bring this up? Because we have the same thing in this document. It's the same structural thinking. In this document, the equivalent of the disarming of Hamas is the nuclear issue. Isn't that the big issue? Isn't that the main event? Isn't that the main course of this meal? Is getting rid of the nuclear and dealing with the uranium? Well, I'm going to read you the clause about the nuclear in this Memorandum of Understanding. Okay, I'm going to pull it up here. Here we go. The clause about the nuclear is, here we go. The Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms that it shall not procure or develop nuclear weapons, right? Because they always claim they don't want one. Great. So they'll say it again. Lovely. The United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran, and get ready. You might fall asleep while I'm reading this, Doug. They have agreed to resolve the disposition of stockpiled enriched material, the uranium, pursuant to a mechanism that will be mutually agreed upon in accordance with the schedule mentioned in paragraph 7, which has to do with the lifting of sanctions, meaning the lifting of United Nations resolutions against Iran. They want them all repealed. So let me start the sentence again. That they're going to agree to resolve the disposition of the enriched uranium pursuant to a mechanism that will be mutually agreed upon in accordance with the schedule mentioned in paragraph 7, with the minimum methodology to be downblended on site under the supervision of the IAEA. So it already puts in a minimum way of dealing with the uranium, which leaves it all in Iran and just dilutes it a little bit. But then it goes on. This is the best part. And this is what you just said before about agreeing to talk. The two parties also agreed to discuss the issue of enrichment and other mutually agreed matters relating to the Islamic Republic of Iran's nuclear needs based on a satisfactory framework being agreed upon in the final deal. What does this even mean? They agree to have a conversation based on a methodology that's going to be worked out in the final deal. Like, it's a word salad. that's basically saying we're agreeing to talk about this issue in line with a mechanism that we're going to work out later on. Okay? This is the main thing.
It's the whole reason we started bombing them in the first place.
It's completely open to interpretation. So my take on this whole thing is that, like, the Witkoff and Kushner, who have their fingerprints all over this, they're in the room. These are the deal makers. Their way of making a deal is they say, hey, look, let's take whatever issues are standing in the way of coming to some sort of framework agreement, and we'll put them for later, and we'll agree to talk about them, and we'll figure them out down the road. And they have this naive belief that probably comes from being New York real estate guys, where making a deal means you come to some framework agreement and then you have your lawyers and the other people work things out. And if the deal falls through, okay, then maybe there's some litigation, or maybe you just move on to your next deal and you eat the loss. But basically they're like, let's come to some agreement on some things that we can agree with. The things that we can't agree upon right now, or that are too contentious, we don't want to deal with them. We don't want those things to stand in the way of having some framework agreement, because when we have a framework agreement and a handshake and we're all talking and we all say we have an agreement, they believe that the momentum of that will lead to progress. And that having conversations constitutes progress because we're building trust, right? And so it's the exact same template, where the big thing, the main issue, the issue that is so unresolvable that it's what would stand in the way of making a deal if you put it on the table now. So we take it off the table and put it later, and you think you've solved something. That doesn't solve anything. All it means is that you're never going to get to that phase.
Yeah, it's interesting because all of the pushback from the Democrats and from people that saw this were like, well, this is what we had before we started bombing them, and we're just trying to work back to a deal. Is that a fair analysis? I mean, I've heard Elizabeth Warren, I've heard several other politicians make this case that, like, well, isn't this what we had before we started dropping bombs on them, and now we're trying to work back to that place, and the Strait of Hormuz was open before? Is that fair?
If this was actually a deal, but you said it, it's not even really a deal. I'll give you another example. This is a great example from this thing. So a lot of people have been talking about the fact that it promises $300 billion to the Iranians.
Correct.
Right? You've heard that,
saying,
right?
No, we're not giving them a cent.
It's in there. So let me read you that clause. So let's do that one now. Let's read that clause, and then I'll tell you a little bit about it. Okay? Let's find the clause. Where is it? The $300 billion. It's in here somewhere.
Yeah, Trump said, well, it's their
clause
money. It's
6.
just
Here we go.
frozen.
Clause 6. Ready? Here we go. The United States of America undertakes with regional partners to develop a definitive, mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion US for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Okay, the United States of America undertakes with regional partners. So first of all, it says that regional partners are undertaking this with America. And that what are they committing to? They're committing to develop a plan with at least $300 billion for reconstruction. The mechanism for the implementation of this plan will be finalized as part of a final deal within 60 days. Okay, wait. So what does this mean? This means that at the end of the 60 days, the mechanism, it doesn't mean that they'll have the $300 billion. No. It says the mechanism for this will be finalized at the end of the 60 days. Okay, now what is this $300 billion? So I decided to go down that rabbit hole the other day. Like, what is this? What are people saying about it? So there was a Reuters story about this $300 billion that quoted someone high up in the administration who said that it's not government money, forget about American government money, it's nobody's government money, which J.D. Vance had also said, I think, after that story came out, and Trump has said it also. They were very adamant. It's not government funds. It's actually meant to be a private investment fund. Now, who's going to invest in rebuilding infrastructure in Iran? So J.D. Vance was asked about this in a press conference on Thursday. Where's the money going to come from? And his words, and this is a quote, he said, well, there's a lot of interest in the Arab world in investing in Iran. There's a lot of interest, and it's a big population, it's a big economy. There's a lot of interest in the Arab world to invest in Iran. But because of the way the sanctions are, you can't invest, and therefore the United States is going to provide whatever waivers are necessary to allow that investment to flow in there. Now, that's very different than what it says, what I just read to you, because what I just read to you is that they will develop a plan for the reconstruction, not just that they're going to allow private investment in. Okay, that's one thing. But he said that it would be that there's a lot of interest in the Arab world. But what's the problem? The same day, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia was quoted in Al Arabiya, which is the official Saudi government media organ. So it's kind of like if the foreign minister is being quoted in state media in a country that's not free, that's basically a press release. Okay. So the Saudi foreign minister is quoted in Al Arabiya that day saying that he doesn't know anything about this fund and the Americans have never discussed it with the Saudis. And he added, we have no interest in investing in Iran. Okay. And the Jerusalem Post did an interview with this Bahraini businessman who's also like got a big business consulting firm. He's like a well-connected Bahraini business guy because Bahrain and Israel have diplomatic relations. So he was interviewed, and he said that there is zero interest in the Arab world in investing in Iran. And it wasn't because of like we hate them or we're angry because they bombed us. No, he was very pragmatic. He said, you're talking about private equity. Why would they invest in a country that's still run by the Islamic regime? Right. When if you're investing in a major infrastructure project in a country, it means you have to deal with the government. It means that you're beholden to that government down the road. It's not a safe investment. It's not a safe place to put your money. So we're talking about creating. So think about this. This $300 billion is supposed to be private investors. And J.D. Vance is saying that it's coming from the Arab world. The Arab leaders are like, what on earth are you talking about? So now let's take a step back. Everything that I'm saying, now we can sit here, you and me, Doug, and say this whole MOU is ridiculous and it's foolish. And that's not even the point I'm making, even though we're laughing at it. Because if we stop there, then we have to say that the people who are doing this are all just a bunch of idiots and we're smarter than them. And I don't believe that. And that's why I said at the beginning that this document is actually built to fail. It's never, I'll say it simpler. This $300 billion, never going to happen. Zero chance. I'll put my house on that. Never going to happen.
So in that, though, you're saying it's been built to fail. So they're intentionally putting something out there. Is that to build up support maybe amongst the nations to say, look, we've tried every diplomatic option we can, and President Trump got through the midterms, and now we're going to go in and finish what we got to finish?
So I'll tell you what I think
you're implying?
No, what I think it is this. And this speaks to the whole thing of like everyone in the pro-Israel community feeling betrayed by Trump and like, oh my gosh, what's he doing? He's throwing us under the bus. This deal's terrible for us. Look, it's not a good deal, but Trump's also not a fool. And he's not going to suddenly backtrack on everything he has said about Iran over the last few months. And he has said repeatedly that he does not want to leave the Iran issue for a later president to deal with.
Correct.
You have to think about the things he said. He's worried about his legacy. He's not a fool. He knows who he's dealing with. So I think that
if anybody loves themselves a lot, it's President Trump. And so if he's worried about his legacy, he wants to make this happen.
But when you look in this MOU and you see that it totally gives into them on the Strait, it gives Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz, which was like Trump was adamant that we would never do. It actually gives that to them. It unfreezes their assets. It promises them that if they're good boys at the end of this, they'll get another $300 billion. Do you know how much $300 billion is for Iran? Iran's entire economy is about $300 billion. It's like doubling their economy. It's an insane amount of money. Okay. When you read the MOU, it's so over the top. Look, the Iranian state media released the 14-point MOU before America did. Correct. And when they did, people in media were so skeptical about it and thought that it was just Iranian propaganda, that this is what the MOU was, because it was so over the top in Iran's favor. So everyone thought it was a joke. And there was a lot of, in media, people were saying, oh, this can't really be the real thing. It's just from Iranian state media. And then sure enough, it comes out and it's identical to what the Iranians said it was. And people were like, oh my gosh, Trump got steamrolled, Trump got taken for a ride. But because so much of it is so unrealistic and so over the top, my take is that Trump just wanted to get the Straits of Hormuz opened. And he's like, look, these guys aren't going to comply with what we want. They're not. They're not going to rein in Hezbollah. They're not going to stop funding their proxies. They're not going to stop all their nefarious activity. It's not going to happen. They're not going to give over the uranium. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get to those later stages. This is what I think is going on in the Oval Office. I think Trump is saying to the guys who want to make the deal, saying, listen, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Promise them whatever the hell you want. Let's get the Straits of Hormuz opened. Because we got to get the Straits of Hormuz opened so that we can bring down the price of oil, stabilize things, keep things quiet for a little while. And listen, if they comply, if they actually do comply with everything, great. So we'll move forward.
Right.
What if they actually, rein in Hezbollah completely, which is absurd because Hezbollah's entire raison d'etre is to attack Israel. They have no other job, right? I mean, if they actually do that, if they actually, surrender all their nuclear stuff and it's totally under control, again, it still throws the Iranian people under the bus. There's other issues here. I'm not saying it's a good deal, but I'm saying I think that Trump's thinking was that these later commitments that are in the deal are never going to come to fruition anyway, or the likelihood that they will is so slim that who cares? Who cares if it's 300 billion or 500 billion or $1 trillion? None of it's going to happen anyway. So that's why I think that we just need to take a chill pill. Again, I'm not saying it's a good deal. I'm not saying it's good for Israel. It's not. It's not good to throw a lifeline to these guys. I think that the war never should have been stopped on April 8th. And that the only solution, the only way to bring territorial integrity and sovereignty and peace to Lebanon and to help and for Israel to live in peace and for the whole Middle East is if we bring down the Iranian regime. Yes, that is, I believe that that's the only way we could do it. I think that J.D. Vance is very naive. The stuff that he said today, leaving Geneva, was just ridiculous. He was talking about how, if Hezbollah and Israel could just have could have regular conversations, then maybe it would de-escalate things. I think, why would Israel and Hezbollah have regular conversations? Hezbollah is not a state. They don't have any other role in life other than attacking Israel. Why would Israel have conversations with them? So I think J.D. Vance is it's obvious to everyone that he's the guy behind this. He's been the one defending the deal on all the shows, and he's the one who went to Geneva and leading the group. And Trump even made a comment, and I think I don't know if he was half joking or if he was really serious, where he said, listen, this is JD's deal. If it doesn't work out, we'll blame it on him. But I think Trump tends to throw out these comments, and there's usually some truth to them. I think that it's speaking to the fact that JD wanted to do this deal, and Trump's attitude was, I need quiet now anyway. Let's get the Straits open. You want to try this deal? Go for it. Promise him whatever you want. Get a deal done. Because you see that even with JD going there, Trump's been, he's still been hard on the Iranians. The last couple of days, his Truth Social posts, he's been the same trash talking of them. So anyway, that's my take on this thing. We could go through more clauses in it, but I don't know if it's worthwhile.
But with Lebanon right now, Israel has seemingly considered holding on hostilities in that direction, and they did get some very direct pushback from the White House. President Trump made some pretty disparaging remarks towards, every time you shoot a missile and you guys shoot them down, you don't have to bring a whole apartment building down. Like he went after them a little bit with a little bit of pushback. Is Israel going to continue? I know Prime Minister Netanyahu has said they're going to continue to respond, but are they considering a pullback? Like what's going on with
Israel's
that?
not pulling back from anywhere. Israel's not pulling back. No. There's not going to be a withdrawal. And President, look, the thing that I was concerned with Lebanon until yesterday was that the Iran, Elliot Chodoff taught us on this podcast many times that we have to remember that Hezbollah is not technically a proxy of Iran. Everyone calls it a proxy. He always stressed this to us. Hamas is a proxy. The Houthis are a proxy. They're an independent organization that gets money and weapons and support from Iran. Hezbollah is Iran, meaning if the United States has troops in some other country, those troops aren't a proxy of the United States. They are America. Correct. They're American troops. That's Hezbollah's relationship to Iran. It's Iran. So what was the game Iran was playing? Hezbollah fires drones and rockets at Israel. Israel retaliates. And then Iran says to America, hey, Israel's violating the ceasefire. Israel is bombing. And then Trump starts trashing, Bibi and telling Israel to back off and to de-escalate. But why did it all start? Because Hezbollah attacked us. But Hezbollah is Iran, which means that Iran is telling Hezbollah to attack Israel and then telling America, hey, get Israel to stop. Meaning they were playing this game. Yeah. Why? Because it was a win-win for them. If Israel listens to America and gets deterred and reined in, then that's great for Iran. They've just showed that Hezbollah can attack Israel with impunity. And they also show it's a show of strength that they were able to rein in Israel by pressuring America. It's also good for them within Lebanon that they can show the Lebanese people that they're stopping the bombing, which has domestic value for them. But if Israel does retaliate and defies America, then it drives a bigger wedge between the U.S. and Israel, which is also good for them. And it was a good move for Iran to do this. But the big problem with it was that I was really upset about for days was, why is Trump going along with this game? Why doesn't he call out Iran and say, hey, you got to rein in Hezbollah and get them to stop provoking the Israelis? And he finally did it yesterday. He put out a social post yesterday where he pointed the finger at Iran. And that's why it's been quiet for the last day. It hasn't been quiet because they're in Geneva. Maybe it's also because they're in Geneva. Iran told Hezbollah to keep it quiet now. They don't want Hezbollah firing at Israel. So this was the first 24-hour period, the last 24 hours that Hezbollah didn't fire anything at us. Obviously, Iran told them to keep it quiet. They're in Geneva. They have Trump who's pointing a finger at them. They told them to keep quiet. But it's just patently obvious that the only solution to Lebanon is to let Israel deal with Hezbollah. We should also add in that Israel has made tremendous progress in the last few days. The main command center of Hezbollah, which is this big underground city.
I saw they captured so many drones and missiles and all sorts of
these tunnels are even bigger than the stuff in Gaza.
Wow.
Underground hospitals, there's all kinds of stuff in there. They call it the main nerve center of Hezbollah, that Israel is finally closing in on it, and apparently there's some Hezbollah guys trapped in part of it. Israel is getting closer and closer to really dealing a fatal blow to Hezbollah. And that's part of why Iran is so panicked over the Lebanon situation. Suddenly in these last couple of weeks, this whole thing became about Lebanon because Israel is making headway. So listen, we're not out of the woods yet. My point isn't that everything's hunky-dory. My point is that, yes, there are bumps in the road, and we're in the middle of a bumpy ride right now with the U.S.-Israel relationship and with what's going on in Geneva and with the Iranians, and we don't know what the future holds. But bottom line, a lot of the disturbing stuff in this MOU is never going to happen. It's never going to happen. I think we just need to all calm down, and I think things are not as bad as people think.
I want to finish this with a theological question, because in the Christian world, a lot of the questions I have been getting is, well, we're not going to be able to solve this anyway. Everybody's going to continue to fight everybody until, from a Christian perspective, until Jesus returns and sets everything straight. Is there a Jewish perspective an apocalyptic? Do you expect that the whole world is going to come to peace and then Messiah will appear? Does Messiah come and put everything right first? How does that work in your framework? Because I've been getting a lot of, and I probably opened up a can of worms at the end here that we can't fully unpack.
No, it's fine.
But I've gotten several questions, just kind of like, hey, Pastor, like, isn't it futile, all of these arrangements and agreements, because they're all not going to work out anyway, and we just need God to sort it out, basically, is the gist of the question. Is that a fair assessment in the Jewish community? Do you think that way? Or give me a perspective here.
Well, I mean, first, even though we, of course, believe that the end of the story is good and that in the end, Messiah comes, redemption comes, and the good guys win, that's fundamental to to having faith in God, in the God of the Bible. But to someone who says that to you, I would say, well, that doesn't mean that we don't defend people who are being attacked by evil, right? Sure. I mean, like Israeli towns are being shelled by Hezbollah guys. The fact that defeating Hezbollah isn't going to bring world peace and bring about the time where we've all beaten our swords into plowshares and knowledge of God covers the earth like water covers the sea. Just because that's not the outcome of defeating Hezbollah doesn't mean that it's not very important to save lives and to fight evil.
100%.
So. From a theological perspective, the ultimate redemption is not what's on our agenda right now. What's on our agenda right now is
not either or, it's both and.
Right. It's bringing security to our northern communities. It's bringing security to our northern communities. At the same time, there is also the issue of fighting evil, destroying evil. Now, one difference between the normative Jewish way of thinking about this, and I say normative because there are parts of the Jewish community that don't think this way, but normative Jewish way of thinking about this and normative Christian way of thinking about these types of things, the Christian way of thinking about them puts a lot more on God sorting things out. And in the Jewish mindset, it's like God empowers us to do things, and we need to take the bull by the horns. And then once we do, God assists us. So the success of the IDF, and, we hear a lot about miracles that happen with soldiers on the battlefield, but that all happens because of our initiative. That's theologically speaking, for Jews, we have to take steps. We have to take risks. We have to put ourselves out there and jump in. And that's what then triggers God assisting us. And if we're not going to do for ourselves, God, that doesn't bring God in. We need to show courage, and that brings God in. David slays Goliath, but of course God is helping him when he does it. But he has to have the courage to go stand there as this kid who's who's kind of exposed and is just has a slingshot and we remember what he says at that time where he calls out the name of God. But he still has to show that courage and take that action, and so that's our attitude about these types of issues, that we have to act in those moments, and that ultimately is what brings about success. Now, of course, there is the larger issue that there's an obligation that most in the West are kind of don't have such conviction for anymore. There's an obligation of good people to defeat evil, and it's just not something that's on our agenda anymore. And this is where we need to really take a lesson from the generation that fought the Nazis and fought Imperial Japan. They had that conviction that it's worth risking your life and giving your life to defeat evil. So, yeah. No,
amen. I think Christians could use a dose of courage, and I think that's part of what's wounding our churches. We have a lot of spineless pastors that aren't willing to step into the middle of history and declare good from evil and to speak truth to power. And I think it's an imperative that we get back to those biblical values where, yes, God is going to work on our behalf, but he expects us to put our hand to the plow and not look back. And so I think that's a good thing for us to continue to pray, continue to hope, continue to look to the future, but continue to work in the present for the right things and the good things, and continue to as always, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Amen. Amen, Doug.
Amen. Well, thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, rate, and share this podcast. Subscribe on Patreon. Come on over to Facebook, like our page, join our group, drop by YouTube, and check this out. And you can watch the video, as we would love to connect with more and more of our Shoulder to Shoulder family. And we'll see you on our next episode.